how the idea was born, given that you've worked for a long time with the founders.
And then 18 years ago, we decided to set up a fully fledged university. We were very active, for example, in technology, in bringing many different technology innovations into the learning process.
What is the typical student profile for IE MBA?
Just focus on some particular sorts of student who look for working in a certain industry or profession.
Are they born or they can be made?
It was also associated with being more promiscuous, as regards your relations, but this is secondary.
Do you think AI as technological wonder is going to help the educators or disrupt it?
My response is that AI is a formidable amplifier of the learning process, well used and well learned.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this second episode of Business Talks. Really glad to see you with us. Today's guest is Professor Santiago Íñiguez. He's the president of IE University in Madrid, Spain, and a very well known figure in global education and indeed in business education. Santiago, great to see you here today.
Thanks very much for having me here.
I would like to start with exploring the university's history a bit, how the idea was born, given that you've worked for a long time with the founders of today's IE University, and how did you end up at where you are today? So the evolution of your personal career would be interesting to hear.
No, as you say, I've been very lucky to work with the founder for the past 37 years. IE Business School first was a very international institution. We were based in Madrid. It happened that we were in Madrid, but we were very international, attracting students from many different corners of the world. And then 18 years ago, we decided to set up a fully fledged university, combining currently 6 different schools, from architecture and design to science and technology, including law, economics and political science, as well as humanities, along with business education. So we are aimed at becoming a universal university in time, and the fastest growing segment is actually science and technology. So what we hope is that at some stage we will be graduating the leading scientists and the engineers that may solve many of the problems of the future society. But I guess that what has defined our university over the years is a number of values that were very much from the very beginning. We are very entrepreneurial. This is distinctive not just of the founders, but also of the faculty, the staff, and of course our graduates, regardless whether they work for the public administration or if they work in their family business or large corporations. They all possess this entrepreneurial instinct, the passion for innovation, for disruption, for making things in a different way. We are also very innovative. This is the way they see us, sometimes even disruptive. And this has been a reason for criticism. And I recall a number of times when we were criticized for doing things that have become actually the pattern. For example, let me just provide you with a sample. We were criticized 30 years ago because we launched an executive MBA. And that was seen as an improper academic offer from a business school, from an academic business school. As we all know, the portfolio of MBAs has enlarged, and executive MBAs is one of the most demanded degrees today. But we were normally disruptive, we were breaking through, we were very active, for example, in technology, in bringing many different technology innovations into the learning process. Again, We, for example, in 2000 entered the blended, the hybrid methodology, offering online and face-to-face forms of delivery. And again, we were criticized because online was seen as a massive tutor-led form of education. But the fact is that we employed the same faculty and we innovated as regards hybrid methodologies. And then we believe very much in humanities as a way to educate global citizens. Our mission as university is not just preparing the best possible employees or entrepreneurs, it's actually producing highly committed global citizens.
Very interesting. So I would like to come back to that, choice that you made as a university in the conversation a bit later. But just to understand the program and the type of people you guys are targeting as students. So what is the typical student profile for IE MBA?
It's very diverse, to be very honest. I mean, to start with, we attract participants from 160 different countries, which reveals the enormous diversity in terms of backgrounds, cultures. We also bring into our university people with different professional backgrounds. We very much value having different visions of the world or even visions of the good life in campus, because part of the value proposal to participants is precisely providing them with a very diverse atmosphere where they can actually learn from diversity. So diversity is one of the reasons why applicants choose IE. Diversity in the best meaning of the word, because I realize that today diversity has become, the target of all sorts of criticism. But the fact is that research shows that diversity in organizations produces more innovation. So the reason why we attract people so different is because this brings lots of innovation into the classroom. And then we not just focus on some particular sorts of student who look for working in a certain industry or profession. I realize that there are some business schools that specialize, let's say, in consultants. So they have very close ties with the leading consultancies. If we look at the companies that hire our students, it's a very ample spectrum comprising from consultancies, but also financial institutions to family businesses, to industries, industrial companies. So it's very varied, this spectrum of companies. But what we favor most is actually having an entrepreneurial spirit. So I guess we attract lots of entrepreneurs, people who decide to set up their own companies or join a startup or join a scale-up or working for a very entrepreneurial organization. So I guess probably the two things that attract most candidates is this entrepreneurial orientation as well as the international focus and this diversity of the student pool.
So this kind of reminds me of one of the questions which may come across as a bit cliche, but it would be interesting to hear your views on that as someone who's been dealing with business school students for the last few decades. So entrepreneurs, are they born or they can be made?
This is a recurrent question that we all think at some stage. And I guess they are both born and they are made. And in fact, there are studies that show that there's a very high percentage of what they call forced entrepreneurs, people who lost their jobs or people who have to maintain their families and become entrepreneurs. So those individuals are also entrepreneurs, but they call them forced entrepreneurs. I guess we attract both types of entrepreneurs, people who may belong, let's say, to the second or third generation of a family business, who have these or feel this responsibility or of creating value across generations. We We also attract people who are passionate about launching a startup or of transforming a given industry. But we also attract people who work for the public administration or a public company and want to reinvent the way they serve the interest of the civil population. But anyway, going to your question, I've written about this because I was very curious to know whether there was research on this particular subject, research from the perspective of biology or biotechnology. And for some time there was a gene that was identified as the distinctive gene of the entrepreneurs. No, I cannot recall, what is the exact, is G something. If you search on internet, you will find it. Supposedly, those who are entrepreneurs possess this gene that orientates entrepreneurs to be, let's say, more adventurous, more innovative, more against, social currents, more irreverent. They are outliers, people who don't comply with the rules. So all these features, all these forms of behavior are common among the bulk of entrepreneurs. It was also associated with being more promiscuous, as regards your relations, but this is secondary.
That's an interesting one. We should talk about that later.
But the fact is that, to be very honest, I guess if you expose yourself to an atmosphere which is filled with entrepreneurs, where you breathe the entrepreneurial air, you become an entrepreneur yourself, which is what we try to do with our students. Even if they come for different reasons and they don't feel the call of entrepreneurship, what we plan is to expose them to the entrepreneurship phenomenon so that they realize about the many advantages of creating a company, and they, for example, develop a business plan, they think about ideas, they network with investors, business angels, VCs. So you can actually grow as an entrepreneur. You may have been born in a family business, or you may have entrepreneurship in your genes. This sometimes happens. It's like, those families of artists. If you ask the Bellinis in Renaissance Italy, did they have, this spirit of the arts in their genes? Well, maybe they had after several generations, that was in their genes, but it was actually a profession that was taught across generations, and this is also done at IE and at many different businesses.
You attract different type of candidates to the business school. You spoke about diversity, the importance of people from different backgrounds in different countries. So is the feeling about the future positive? Because there are many arguments these days that MBA is becoming irrelevant. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've been working in business education for the past 38 years. And between us, every 5 years, there's a campaign or there's a crisis that many opinion makers or influencers point at the crisis of the MBAs. And I've been reading this, as I say, every 3-5 years, there's someone who points at some element that shows a crisis in the MBAs. But the fact is that the MBA degree, along with the Bachelor in Business Administration, which is its young partner or the young brother, they are the hottest tickets in higher education. Of course, we now see that there's also degrees in AI, engineering, or data analytics has also been, a very hot ticket. But the fact is that business education and management at large has become what I sometimes call, the new liberal arts. Formerly, universities delivered the most demanded degree was actually liberal arts. Today, the liberal arts at most universities is actually business or management education. And there's a reason for this, which is that behind any potential profession, there's always management. Behind a good professional, there's good practice, there's good budgeting, there's knowing how to deal with other people, managing people. So if you think about a doctor, or you think about an architect, or you think about a priest, behind the exercise, the good exercise of any of those professions, there's always good management. Management is all pervasive. So if an architect wants to succeed, they should better, for example, design their projects in time, budget, and serving the interests of their customers, which is not normal. If we think about some starry architects, they normally pass, budgets by far. They don't pay attention to the demands of their clients. So we need to realize that most professions should be very much aligned with good management. So to be very honest, over the years, I've been seeing criticisms against the MBA because it didn't serve the interests of the stakeholders. Well, the fact is that the MBA is still, the main degree in terms of employment, because MBAs were arrogant. This was another piece of criticism. And it's true that some schools were instilling this sense of arrogance in their students, which is something that we have tried at IE Business School to avoid. I very much believe in humbleness as a value of a good manager. There were also criticisms regarding the high salaries of MBAs, but this is just a consequence of the market, no? The law of offer and demand. So there's nothing that can be done there. But overall, and over the years, the fact is that MBAs remain the most successful degree of, I would say, the past 50 years.
Excellent. Sorry for you already answered this question, but I'm interested in the history of the online MBA program that you have, which is ranked as top online MBA program in the world by the Financial Times. Can you tell me about how the idea emerged and why online? And really, in today's world, post-COVID, is it still as effective as one may think it was probably during the COVID?
It's a very interesting question, very pertinent, because as you say, maybe online is an outdated expression. And maybe we should talk more about technology-based MBA. Given that when we think about our blended or hybrid MBA, we think about many different methodologies, not just delivering contents or sessions online. We think about simulations, we think about fora, we think about synchronous as well as asynchronous forms of delivery. We entered online MBAs in 2000, actually in 1999. It was a decision taken when some other universities, particularly in the US, were entering online programs. Some, like Columbia University, were founding actually their own online companies. It was the time also of the upsurge of the large, what I call online supermarkets or online large providers, because you may recall companies like Loret, for example, which disappeared over the years, no? Because they didn't actually fulfill the basic norms of higher education. But we entered this industry, this particular segment of online programs, because we have believed over the history of IE on the high power of technology to support and enhance the learning process. We very much believe that technology humanizes education, contrary to what some people believe, that it perverts education or it replaces the role of the professor. The fact is that we believe that technology is the best possible complement for human tutors or professors. And we have rehearsed this since 1999, when we launched our first online MBA. What we realized from the very beginning is that we were not a technology company, so we couldn't actually develop platforms or other technologies. This is not our business. There's companies like, let's say, Canvas or Blackboard that develop educational platforms. We weren't actually distributors of knowledge. We were not competing in the publishing business. This entails that over the years, we didn't actually build up, for example, a big platform of contents, something that some other universities tried and failed in doing. What we realized from the very beginning is that the best way to build up a competitive advantage as regards online programs is the way you build up routines that combine faculty, staff, technology, platforms and students. So what we did was actually develop apps that enhanced, for example, the function of platforms like Blackboard. We developed lots of materials with a very interactive methodology. We even developed some, in collaboration with technology companies, some forms of delivery like what was called the WOW Room. The WOW Room was a virtual auditorium where the professor interacted with screens and the faces of their students, so that they could actually follow, given face recognition technology, they could follow whether the students were attending, whether they were bored, and this helped the professor not to change, the class, or to raise questions, or to interact, more intensely with participants. So, in the end, education can actually benefit a lot from technology. The question is how to combine all those different routines and enhance the learning process. This is what we have discovered. And interestingly, going to your point, and I teach in this program because given that I travel extensively, I cannot commit myself to, teach in a traditional classroom-based program. But what we have discovered over the years is that this methodology enhances an overall set of skills in participants that traditional forms of learning don't actually exercise or develop. Let me just put you an example. In blended programs, in online interaction, introverts, students who are more inhibited, interact more often, whereas in traditional classroom settings, they are shy, they don't talk. So, interestingly, the introverts are normally the more creative and more innovative. So if you combine both methods, you gather much more ideas from the class. You produce more synergies, and the overall result is much better than if there's just, 2 or 3 people talking in the class.
So I used a bit of technology yesterday evening when doing homework with my son. We were doing math, which is one of our mutually favorite subjects. Do you think AI, as the latest technological wonder, is going to help the educators or disrupt it? So probably this is the first question. And second, from the point of the learners, the students themselves, does it carry more risks, or is it going to help us to be better at learning, at thinking, framing the questions in terms of collaboration and teamwork, which are at least as essential, I guess, as technical skills that we learn in a formal settings. So these would be the 2 questions.
Well, regarding the first one, which is whether it helps the faculty, the professors, and the learning process, my response is that AI is a formidable amplifier of the learning process. It provides lots of advantages, well used and well learned, which means that we can actually learn much more. We can practice all our cognitive skills deeper. We can enhance our knowledge of the world. We can perfect many different skills like communication, in writing, in talking. We can learn languages. So the advance that AI is actually bringing is formidable, I would say. Of course, what we need is to align the faculty with the use of AI. And this is similar, or actually it's more challenging than previous disruptions or breakthrough changes. But what I know is that most universities are now adapting and trying to bring in all the positive things about AI. Cognitive skills vary over time, and we shouldn't be very concerned about these changes, because sometimes, I see these two extremes portrayed by mostly futurists. No, some of them see AI as a dystopia. No, it's going to bring a world where humans won't think anymore. Well, I guess that is exaggerated.
Well, the founders of leading AI companies today are not helping us either in that respect.
So. Correct, and robots, dominating the world, and then humans becoming, let's say, servants, not to technology. This has been actually the theme of many science fiction movies. You probably recall 2001, The Space Odyssey, sure. A fantastic movie based on the novel of Arthur C. Clarke, no? Where, the machine, this algorithm, HAL, no? In the end, kills the whole crew of... this is one of the extremes. The other extreme is utopia, no? Technology is going to help us so that the technology will do all the work for us, and we will live in a sort of Arcadia, drinking, eating, and just enjoying, leisure. Well, both extremes are very unreal. I guess what we need is to prepare our students and the faculty in order to manage technology in the best possible way, which actually is applicable to any single profession. Of course, that AI is going to ease many different tasks in consultancy, in professional services, in law, legal services, almost in every single task that we can conceive. But the job as such will still be done by the professional. And this is why when I'm asked by companies, what sorts of arguments can we use in order to continue hiring youngsters? I was actually approached by one of the vice presidents of Citi Bank in London, because she was a little concerned because the board was deciding to stop hiring youngsters. And she was asking me, what sorts of arguments can I use? I told them, the basic arguments that most people would use. The first thing is, the youngsters are the ones who know technology much better. You may fire people who are not well prepared, for the new environment, but you should continue employing and hiring youngsters. Second, if you stop hiring youngsters, you're going to have a problem. The pipeline at your company is going to get very mature, so you won't have successors for the leading positions in the very near future. And third, you may run a reputational problem, because if youngsters start seeing your company as a senior company, they won't, for example, purchase your products. They would talk badly about your company, and you will enter, a very negative spiral that is undesirable. So you should continue hiring youngsters. And what I can tell is that our university, for example, prepares the best possible youngsters to be hired. No. On the other, I was talking about how AI enhances the whole learning process. On the side of students, of course, any tool, and even if it's a formidable tool like AI, requires a good handling. And in this respect, what we emphasize, for example, very much at IE, is to nurture the cognitive skills, to think before you ask Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini. to iterate a number of times with your AI device, to think outside the box, to use different sources. But all these cognitive skills existed in the past, and they are going to change in the future, fortunately. Let me just tell you an anecdote. The former president of Harvard University, Drew Faust, who's a professor of history, she once told me, well, my students of history are not able to read course, to read manuscript writing. And of course, given that we sometimes require, writing things down, and if they cannot, read whatever you write in handwriting. But the fact is that if you think it carefully, we are not able to read manuscripts of the Middle Ages, I guess. I'm assuming that you may have challenges as well. Maybe you are able, but
I hope soon we will be able to, with the help of the models themselves. Yeah.
But if you read, the typical wall with those manuscripts, or the Magna Carta in the UK, we have some issues, no? So this has to do with how we evolve our cognitive skills, because our ancestors in the Middle Ages, they were able to read manuscripts, no? And so the thing is that cognitive skills are evolving. What we need is to adapt to the new environment and try to prepare our children, our students, and our faculty, of course, and our senior people, because we are now managing 6 different generations in organizations. So we should better, learn how to manage AI and technology in the best possible way.
So trust, governance, and the rules of the game around the topic are very important in your opinion.
Absolutely. But this has to do, again, with how to nurture basic values and the virtues in our students, which is what universities are called on to do. We are not just preparing the best professionals. We want to graduate citizens who are committed to a series of values. So since Middle Ages, the time when universities were founded, universities have actually enhanced virtues, no? Virtues like loyalty, resilience, virtues like commitment. Those virtues are very important in order to exercise any profession in the best possible way.
I also wanted to ask about the equality in education, wider access to education. Do you think the latest technological trends and developments, or the technological developments that you've witnessed throughout your career, have been enablers of education being accessible to the wider communities? And are we on a path to that bright future, or do you reckon that we will face some problems and indeed reversal to more concentration and more difference between the people who know and those who don't have access to that kind of knowledge?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I guess that education to begin with, no? My main statement would be education is the best possible equalizer in society. So if you can actually provide access to education to the wider part of your society, the more equal your society will be. Having said this, the question is how to provide that access to population, how to adapt to the different needs. One of the advantages of education, as you say, is that it can make the learning process and education more personalized. We, for example, now recognize at IE 32 different special needs in young students. You may recall at our time, although you are much younger than I, no? But in my time, whenever there was someone who wrote with the left hand, they were forced to write with the right hand. No, if there was anyone with attention deficit, they were failed. Today, we can actually deal with, let's say, dyslexia in a much better way to what happened just decades ago. So the advantage of technology is that you can personalize learning. The second advantage is that you can distribute contents and sessions, recorded sessions, to a very wide universe of people. Having said this, what we have discovered over the latest waves of innovation through technology and education, the MOOCs, the online platforms. I mean, when the MOOCs, the massive online open courses, were launched, there were some prophets that said this is going to solve the universal access to education. But then we all discovered that the problem is not just providing free access to content. The problem may lie in the bandwidth. So if you don't provide bandwidth in sub-Saharan Africa, then there's no universal access to content nor education. So it's not an easy it's not an easy challenge to solve. You may provide tablets, you may provide contents, but then there's a number of circumstances that are needed in order to provide the best possible access to education. So another thing has to do with how to enhance meritocracy, but that's a different problem, no? Because many philosophers have discussed about how to enhance meritocracy in the admissions process, no? There's different visions. What we all try at universities is provide the best possible access and education to the most talented. But of course, the mechanisms in order to provide access to those who deserve it are very discussable and very varied.
Santiago, so I wanted to touch upon the partnership that you signed with a number of organizations in Azerbaijan, including our company, PASHA Holding. What should be our expectation from this partnership with IE University?
Well, I hope we can actually fulfill very high expectations. We have a long tradition of corporate partnering. Over the past 38 years, we have run corporate programs for not just the Spanish large corporations, where we accompanied all their cadres to internationalize their activities. We may think about some financial institutions like Santander, or like VBBA, or Caixa, or we may think of Telefónica, or some other large companies that have Repsol, that have actually landed in different countries. But elsewhere in Europe, we, for example, have a joint venture with the Financial Times that runs corporate programs for companies that bring journalists from the FT and our own faculty. We also have a number of centers across the globe. We run executive education in the Americas. Now we have a university also based in New York City. We just opened an executive education center in Riyadh, and we have there large partners like Aramco or STC, or we train the financial cadres of the kingdom through Altamayus, which is a consortium of the Big Four, and some other financial organizations. So we have a long tradition in training managers, entrepreneurs, and leaders at different sorts of organizations. We bring those values that we also instill in the participants across our programs: entrepreneurship, good management skills, very good technical preparation, but mostly all those attitudes and virtues and values that feature our students. And then in the case of the PASHA Holding and SOCAR and the rest of the institutions that are also supporting this alliance, what we can promise is that we are going to do our best in order to develop a hub here in Baku, in Azerbaijan, in order to nurture talent, to grow up the entrepreneurial spirit, to generate value, and to contribute to the transformation of the society. What I've seen over the years is that the best catalyst for social transformation is education. And I'm not talking about education from a macro perspective. I'm talking about training one-on-one different managers that become the creators of new businesses, entrepreneurs, or the CEOs who change their companies, managers who are committed. So we have seen over the years in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in Spain, in the Americas, elsewhere in Europe, that the power of education and management education in particular is tremendous. So we have high expectations, and there's very close, very strong affinity in terms of joint visions, passion for entrepreneurship, innovation, and international orientation with PASHA.
So you put a lot of emphasis on individual manager, a well-rounded individual, which is as good as in soft skills as she or he may be in hard skills, in technical skills. And I think you touch upon these points in the number of books that you've written over the years, the last one being The 7 Deadly Sins. Can you talk about the book a bit and the main messages that it brings? What are these 7 sins? And is there really a panacea to deal with each and every of them?
Well, I really enjoyed writing this book on Dante's Purgatorio, the Purgatory. You may be familiar with Dante's Divine Comedy, which is one of the classic books in Italy and European culture at large.
And indeed, the book is called Dante in the Workplace.
That's correct, because what I try is to identify situations, episodes, where the 7 capital sins, as they are called, are reproduced or cultivated in the corporate arena. The basis or the starting point of the book is that we are not angels. None of us are angels. We are humans. So what we try is to cultivate virtues. And virtues are normally, as Aristotle, the philosopher, explained, are the balance between 2 extremes. So normally the vices have to do with, for example, pride on the one extreme, arrogance, and on the other extreme with diffidence, someone who doesn't have any sort of self-esteem. Both extremes are wrong and are negative and impede becoming a true leader in organizations. So what you have to do is try to balance between the 2 extremes, try to the right middle, no? As Aristotle explained, in order to manage organizations both efficiently as well as in order to move other people. No one enjoys having an arrogant boss. No one enjoys having an angry boss. An angry boss is unbearable. Or a boss that is envious. I mean, envy is something which is very common in the corporate world, and nobody recognizes that that we are envious. But the fact is that at some extent, at some circumstance, we all have this sentiment. No? Maybe in the late career, when you become old and you see, that youngsters take your position. So we are all humans.
I read somewhere recently that MBA graduates are usually by orders of magnitude more jealous if their friend or peer buys the same car that they bought compared to engineers, for instance.
Well, you are very right that comparisons are stressed very much at the MBA programs, among other things because one of the assessment systems that is commonly used at MBA programs is the normal distribution, the Gauss, sorts of distribution that forces always to fail, let's say, 15% of the class and give, the highest grade to the 15 top percent. But the fact is that this enhances comparisons. The fact is that we all compare ourselves. We are comparative animals, not just in business, but in real life. We compare ourselves the way we are dressed. We compare ourselves regardless our personal relations or where we live. So comparing ourselves is not something necessarily wrong. The problematic thing is when you start being sad because of the good things that happen to others. So what I try in the book is to provide pieces of advice in order not to fall into those vices: envy, anger, sloth, pride, all those sources of sadness, maybe depression, and mostly, in the field of business, they are sources of inefficiencies and bad leadership. I always recall a quote that comes from Peter Drucker's memoirs. Peter Drucker is considered the father of management. And he tells in his memoirs that when he was attending the seminar delivered by John Maynard Keynes, the Nobel Prize winner and leading economist at Cambridge University, so he tells literally, most of my fellow students in the room, in the class, were interested in the behavior of commodities, while I was interested in the behavior of people. So this is what features actually true managers. Management is not about becoming a consummated financial engineer. It's not about knowing the models that make you become the champion in marketing anticipation. Management is about leading other people. And in order to lead other people, you need to nurture those virtues, try to find the right balance, the middle between the two extremes, try to know who you work with, who are your subordinates, what are their concerns, their family problems, their ambitions. So if you want to become a good leader, you should better become an expert in how to understand other people. And as many studies show, the people who succeed in organizations are not the geniuses. They are not the leading guys with analytical skills. And this is something that we have to correct, because normally we take the GMAT as the main assessment tool in order to admit candidates in the MBA program. But the fact is that those who succeed in real life are those who have very strong emotional intelligence. And this is what we have to nurture at business schools and in education at large. We need to cultivate managers who deal with other people, who are able to lead effectively other people.
You refer to quite, you mentioned Dante and the Purgatory, but in your works and in your narrative, you really refer quite a lot to philosophers. I remember you talking about David Hume and others, and humanities in general being very important for the manager. One thing is being a nice human being in order to be an effective manager, as you just described. And another one is having this broad base of education, which is really not trivial, right? You have to try a lot individually in order to achieve that kind of base. Otherwise, you're really in this narrow field of your own and you're happy there. So does history really show that these kind of leaders were more successful than the ones who were more of specialists?
That's an interesting question. I defend that management is philosophy in action. This is one of my mottos, no? Management is philosophy in action. What I mean by that is that behind every major management decision, there's always values, principles, there's a vision of the world, and there's also a conception of what your company should be and how it should perform. So it would be in your interest to analyze what are those values and principles than just instead, act by instinct. It's always good to think and make you explicit your principles, to try to find out what are your values, what gives meaning to your life. So what I've done over the past books was actually linking the theories of philosophers to particular situations. It's very important because managers, to a large extent, have to take decisive decisions. They have to lead people. They have to control large organizations. They have to give meaning to their lives, and making the right questions and trying to find, the right challenges is something that is in the interest of both managers and their companies as well. So what I do many times at my strategy course or at the course that I now teach on management and philosophy is precisely try to enhance what are those values behind management decisions. Questions like, what can I know, which has been a classic philosophical question, are very applicable today in circumstances of almost complete uncertainty, even if we live in the age of almost infinite information. And the fact is that today it's even more challenging and more difficult to solve certain questions. So unless you have an idea of what you can know and to what extent you can actually cope and map the uncertainty of the world, which is the typical question brought by, you were mentioning David Hume, but many other philosophers who dealt precisely with the question of what can you know. But there's some other questions which are equally basic. For example, can I be happy and how can I achieve happiness? Or how should I behave? There's lots of ethical dilemmas in business, and philosophy doesn't necessarily provide answers to practical questions, but it provides the instruments and the reasoning that allows you to deal with those questions and raise the right questions in the best possible manner. So I realize after these years that managers read much more than what we think. We believe that managers are people oriented towards action and that they don't care for reading or philosophizing. But the fact is that they read, they think, and they care about these deep questions much more than what we think. And I very much recommend to revisit the classics. Over the years, what you realize is that philosophy provides you with the tools for connecting the dots, the tools for giving meaning to what you have done over your career, the tools for justifying what a company does. So management, again, is not a technical discipline. It's a discipline that helps you to better give meaning to your life and to your company. We also emphasize very much the training and the education of humanities at our university, because we very much believe that by, for example, learning the arts, managers actually develop this very important cognitive skill, which is observation. You probably noticed how much time an architect devotes to analyzing a building, or an arts historian to look at a picture. I wonder, that on average people spend just 10 seconds in front of a painting at a museum, and probably youngsters spend even less time. So that entails a problem, which is when you confront a financial balance, financial statement, you may devote also seconds in order to. So unless you have a very quick, or you use AI, but you need also to correct AI many times. So unless you exercise those observational skills, you won't actually have the capacity to analyze statements or readings or balance sheets or many other documents that are basic in order to interpret what is the performance of a company.
Thank you very much for all our viewers for watching this episode of Business Talks. I hope to see you all soon. Take care.
Thanks very much, Teymur.
Thank you. Thank you very much.